It was meant to be a harmless prank, but one reckless moment turned Windsor Castle into a stage for a lesson the world would never forget. When disrespect struck a royal guard, the silence that followed spoke louder than words. Before we dive into this powerful story, hit the subscribe button and tell us where you're watching from. On a bright spring morning, Windsor Castle was alive with the buzz of eager tourists awaiting the changing of the guard. Among the crowd was Darren Mitchell, a young Australian prankster who had made a name for himself with online antics. Armed with a camera crew and an ill-advised plan, Darren sought to turn this dignified ceremony into the backdrop for his ultimate April Fool's prank. Stationed in the courtyard was Sergeant Edward Collins, a seasoned member of the King's Guard. Beneath the scarlet tunic and bearskin hat stood a soldier who had served in some of the world's most challenging theaters of conflict. His posture, stoic and unwavering, represented not just the monarchy, but the sacrifices of countless soldiers who had worn the uniform before him. Darren's antics started innocently enough, mocking the guard's discipline, imitating his stance, and joking loudly to the crowd. Yet, as the minutes passed, Darren's behavior grew increasingly disrespectful. With the crowd's growing discomfort largely ignored, he unveiled his main event, a high-powered water gun disguised as a camera. Without hesitation, he fired a strong stream of water directly at Sergeant Collins' face. The stunned silence that followed was deafening. While many expected outrage, Sergeant Collins demonstrated profound professionalism. With calm precision, he secured Darren, confiscated the disguised weapon, and, more importantly, delivered a measured and powerful lesson about honor, sacrifice, and the true meaning behind the King's Guard uniform. That morning at Windsor Castle, a thoughtless prank turned into a profound reminder. True service deserves respect, not ridicule. For those fortunate enough to witness it, the experience left an enduring impression about duty, dignity, and the timeless values carried by those who stand guard over history. Darren Mitchell had spent years crafting his online persona as a harmless prankster, someone who flirted with boundaries but never truly crossed them, or so he believed. However, the morning he stood before Windsor Castle's grand facade, something shifted. Encouraged by past success and the thrill of an audience, Darren pushed beyond the line of innocent fun into blatant disrespect. At first, his antics seemed juvenile. He exaggerated military marches, struck ridiculous poses next to Sergeant Edward Collins, and muttered sarcastic remarks designed to entertain the crowd. Some onlookers chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or step away. But it was when Darren revealed his so-called masterpiece that the atmosphere grew truly uncomfortable. Pulling from his backpack what appeared to be an expensive camera, Darren revealed a hidden device, a high-powered water gun, custom-made to fool the casual observer. His plan was simple. Shoot a direct stream of water into the face of a standing King's Guard and capture the reaction for his channel. Ignoring the increasingly concerned glances from his friends and tourists alike, Darren launched the prank. A blast of water struck Sergeant Collins squarely in the face, soaking his meticulously pressed scarlet tunic and the medals upon his chest. For a breathless moment, Windsor's courtyard fell into absolute silence. Sergeant Collins, however, did not react with anger. Years of military service, tours through conflict zones, and unyielding discipline had prepared him for moments of far greater gravity. With calm and professional authority, he moved forward, securing Darren's wrist and removing the weapon. There was no unnecessary force, no outburst, only a display of restrained power and unwavering dignity. As Sergeant Collins spoke quietly but firmly to Darren, explaining the depth of meaning behind his uniform, the importance of tradition, and the sacrifices made by those who wore it, the crowd listened in rapt silence. Darren's smirk faded into shame as the weight of his actions became clear. That day, Windsor Castle bore witness to a rare moment. one where disrespect met unwavering professionalism and ignorance was gently but firmly confronted with truth. The lesson lingered long after Darren was escorted away. Traditions endure, not because they are old, but because they are built upon service, sacrifice, and honor, values that deserve not mockery, but our deepest respect. As the water splashed across Sergeant Edward Collins' face, staining the scarlet fabric of his ceremonial tunic, time seemed to freeze within the ancient courtyard of Windsor Castle. The gathered tourists stood motionless, their earlier laughter and curiosity dissolving into a heavy, uneasy silence. Darren Mitchell, once so confident in his so-called harmless prank, now stood visibly shaken. Realizing too late the gravity of his mistake, Sergeant Collins, drenched yet dignified, did not react with anger or humiliation. Instead, he moved with measured precision, the product of years of military discipline. In a swift, controlled motion, he secured Darren's wrist and confiscated the disguised water gun, demonstrating not only his tactical training, but also a level of professionalism that few could comprehend. Rather than raising his voice or responding with hostility, Sergeant Collins spoke to Darren and to everyone present with calm authority. He explained that the uniform he wore was not a costume for tourists to mock, but a symbol of centuries of duty, sacrifice, and national pride. Each medal on his chest represented real service in distant lands, real sacrifices made far from the comfort of home. His words, delivered without malice, resonated deeply in the silent square. Darren, whose fame had been built on stunts and mischief, found himself stripped of bravado. His apologies were genuine, his youthful arrogance replaced by an understanding that could not have been taught through lectures or warnings alone. That morning, he, and all who bore witness, learned that the men standing guard at places like Windsor and Buckingham are not mere symbols, but living testaments to the values that have carried nations through war and peace alike. The lesson went beyond a foolish prank. It became a moment of profound respect as the crowd recognized that true strength lies not in retaliating with anger, but in upholding dignity even in the face of disrespect. Sergeant Collins' conduct turned an act of mockery into a lasting tribute to the meaning of the service. In an era where tradition can be so easily misunderstood, Sergeant Edward Collins quietly reminded the world why some customs deserve not only preservation, but reverence. As Darren Mitchell was led away by castle security, the mood in Windsor Castle's courtyard shifted from silent shock to quiet reflection. The crowd, once eager to snap photos and indulge in lighthearted tourism, had witnessed a profound lesson unfold before their eyes. Sergeant Edward Collins, who had been soaked and mocked, yet remained composed, had done more than protect tradition that day. He had restored it. Parents knelt beside their children, quietly explaining why the guard had stood his ground with such dignity. Elderly visitors nodded to one another, recognizing a standard of behavior that felt increasingly rare in today's hurried world. The tourists who had once surrounded Darren, hoping for a laugh, now looked to Sergeant Collins with newfound respect, many choosing to stand silently, honoring the man who had borne insult with unwavering grace. Sergeant Collins returned to his post, water drying slowly under the warm spring sun. Though his uniform bore visible marks from the assault, his bearing remained immaculate, head high, shoulders back, gaze steady. In standing firm without retaliation, he had embodied values that transcend ceremony, courage, discipline, and deep respect for one's duty. Meanwhile, news of the incident began to spread quickly. Some tourists posted videos online, not to mock Darren's antics, but to praise the guard's composed response. Headlines would soon tell the story, not of a prankster's triumph, but of a soldier's quiet strength. For Sergeant Collins, there was no thought of fame or recognition, only the steadfast fulfillment of his duty, no matter the circumstance. Darren's friends, Mark and Liam, stood off to the side. Their cameras now forgotten, at their sides. They spoke in hushed tones, acknowledging that what had been planned as harmless fun had instead become a moment of deep personal embarrassment and public education. Darren himself, once so brash, was silent. His lesson delivered not by punishment, but by the unshakable dignity of the man he had tried to humiliate. At Windsor Castle that day, the crowd did not leave with mere photographs or souvenir memories. They carried with them something far more lasting, a renewed appreciation for the sacrifices and traditions represented by every scarlet coat and bearskin cap. In Sergeant Collins, they had seen not just a ceremonial guard, but a living testament to the meaning of service, honor, and pride. In the days that followed the incident at Windsor Castle, the story of Sergeant Edward Collins's quiet heroism began to spread far beyond the castle walls. Videos of the encounter flooded social media, but not for the reason Darren Mitchell had hoped. Instead of celebrating a prank, people across the globe praised the calm, resolute dignity of a soldier who had upheld centuries of tradition without ever compromising his composure. News outlets ran thoughtful pieces highlighting the discipline and sacrifice behind the ceremonial uniforms of the King's Guard. Commentators reflected on how the red tunic and bearskin cap represented not just pageantry, but the enduring commitment of soldiers who had served on distant battlefields before standing watch at Britain's most historic sites. In online forums and conversations around kitchen tables, Canadians, Americans, and many others shared their own experiences of learning to respect traditions that they had once taken for granted. The actions of one soldier had reminded the world that real strength is not displayed through retaliation or anger, but through the steadfast upholding of honor under pressure. As Sergeant Collins returned quietly to his duties, the broader impact of his actions became clear. He had transformed an act of foolishness into a teaching moment, a reminder that true service often goes unnoticed, and that respect, once earned, leaves a lasting legacy. At Windsor Castle, the scarlet uniforms continued to gleam in the sunlight. But for those who had been there that day, they now shimmered with a deeper meaning, a reflection of sacrifice, pride, and unyielding dignity. In a world where respect for tradition sometimes feels diminished, the quiet actions of Sergeant Edward Collins remind us that true strength lies not in loud defiance, but in unwavering dignity. When faced with mockery and disrespect, he did not respond with anger or retaliation. Instead, he stood firm, honoring centuries of sacrifice with calm authority and unbreakable composure. His example offers an important lesson. Service, sacrifice, and tradition deserve our understanding, not our mockery. We live in a time where quick entertainment often overshadows the deeper meaning behind uniforms, ceremonies, and symbols. Yet it is precisely these traditions that anchor a nation's history and values. Sergeant Collins' response teaches us that even in the face of ignorance, patience and education can have a lasting impact. Sometimes, a single moment of grace under pressure can reach farther than any reprimand or punishment. For all of us, especially in our later years, his story serves as a reminder that kindness, respect, and a steadfast commitment to duty are virtues that never go out of style. They are the quiet forces that build character, uphold communities, and inspire the generations that follow.